To a special edition of USA Decides. I'm Allister D'Souza in Washington, D.C. Now, with less than 24 hours to go before the polls open, both candidates vying for the most powerful office in the United States and arguably the whole world. They're making that last-ditch attempt, last-minute pitches to voters. Democratic candidate Kamala Harris has her eyes set on the all-important swing state of Pennsylvania, with rallies in Allentown, Pittsburgh and Philadelphia. On the other hand, Republican candidate Donald Trump has the swing states of North Carolina, Michigan and Pennsylvania in his crosshairs. Now let's get you more from NDTV's Gauri Dwivedi, who's been crisscrossing the country to bring you the latest from the ground. She's usually in New Delhi, but now in the US as she covers this historic election. She's been in Pennsylvania and now has this report, the latest from Maryland.
It's 24 hours to go before the election in the United States. The presidential election is pretty much tied till the very end. It's a beautiful morning here in Maryland. Remains to be seen whether the sun will rise now on Kamala Harris, who could create history by becoming the first woman president in the United States, or will it be Donald Trump, who would come back with what many felt was political oblivion. But the fact is that the issues remain the same state after state, with some issues resonating more in particular aspects. I was in Pennsylvania, where fracking was a key concern, along with the fact that poverty rates, especially amongst non-white communities, are very high, and that they feel could be addressed only if there is a stronger economic plan in place. Something that critics of Kamala Harris have said she hasn't been able to successfully communicate to her voters. We also spent time seeing how door-to-door campaigning and canvassing happens in the very last stretch of the elections. We saw that with the Harris campaign. And what we realize now is that the next 24 hours for both campaigns will essentially be about getting your voters to the polling booth. It's not about converting those who are on the fence. It's not about trying to ensure that you get more voters. It's just about ensuring that those who are registered Democrats come out and vote. Record voting has taken place in terms of early voting. They have smashed all records. But nevertheless, an election that is so tight till the very end, every vote counts. Remember, it was just by 80,000 votes that Joe Biden flipped Pennsylvania in 2020, in a state which had 7 million voters. So you can imagine how tiny that margin is, which can be flipped by just a handful or just a couple of thousand votes. So the next 24 hours, United States is going to be seeing who will be the next president. As I said, remains to be seen whether it will be Kamala Harris or Donald Trump. But one thing is for sure, the country is divided, and most importantly, the country is yet to make up its mind. Poll after poll seems to suggest that. In Maryland, for NDTV, this is Gauri Dwivedi.
Well, everyone's been asking who's going to win this election. We've been constantly telling you that it's too close to call. Well, there is one man who's known as the Nostradamus of elections who thinks he knows the answer. He's actually been proved right several times around. That's Professor Alan Luchman. Now, my colleague Vishnu Som spoke to Alan Luchman and found out what he has to say if he's got it right this time around as well.
Well, joining us now ahead of the US elections, an election which is being seen with bated breath, not just in America, but around the world. Alan Lichtman, he's an American historian. He's known as the presidential prophet or the election Nostradamus. He's got 10 of 11 elections right since when? 1984. He joins us now. Mr. Lichtman, wonderful to speak to you. Thank you very much for being with us here at NDTV. My first question: recent trends suggest a mixed picture, with some polls showing Kamala Harris leading or tied in several key states, while others indicate a close race or a slight lead for Donald Trump. What is your sense of where these elections are headed?
You should take all of these polls and do with them what the great philosopher David Hume said you should do to works of superstition: consign them to the flames. They have no predictive value, and they're all well within the margin of error. In 2016, when I predicted Donald Trump which did not make me very popular in 90% plus Democratic DC, where I teach at American University, all of the polls were going in the other direction. In fact, the most eminent compiler of polls, the Princeton University Consortium, gave Hillary Clinton a 99% chance of winning. That's why my keys to the White House are not dependent upon these horse race polls, but they look at the fundamentals that drive American presidential elections, that it's governing, not campaigning, that counts. And I've not changed my prediction since I issued it 2 months ago on September 5th.
Kamala Harris, right?
I predicted, yes, we're going to have Harris, a new path-breaking president, the first woman president, and the first president of mixed African and Asian descent, kind of foreshadowing where America's going. We're rapidly becoming a majority-minority country. Old white guys like me, we're on the decline.
You know, it's interesting. You did say that it's extremely close right now. I think everybody agrees on that one point, and that you're well within a margin of error. Are you certain that you're right? If there is a margin of error at play, some would suggest it could go either way.
I don't suggest it can go either way. My predictions are definitive. I can be proven right or wrong because I tell you who's going to win. And I've been right since I predicted Ronald Reagan's election in April 1982, nearly 3 years ahead of time, when 60% of Americans said he was too old to run again. And retrospectively, in development, I developed the keys in 1981 as a result of analyzing every election since the horse and buggy days of politics, the election of Abraham Lincoln in 1860. So the keys are incredibly robust. Could I be wrong? Of course. I'm a human being. Any human being can be wrong. It's always possible.
Sure.
That some so catastrophic could change 160 years of American history patterns, but I don't think so.
Mr. Lichtman, there's discussion around shifts in demographics like suburban voters, young voters, how issues like abortion might be influencing voter turnout and preference. Are there any shifts in voter demographics, specifically, which you favor? You know, either Harris or Trump. I mean, you believe Harris. So do you believe that, you know, Harris doing well in these elections or winning these elections is because of a shift in voter demographics?
I don't base my prediction on voter demographics. You cannot accurately predict an election by trying to break it down into individual voter groups. I use the analogy of your cup of tea. You pour sugar in it. You learn nothing by trying to follow the individual sugar molecules, but you can learn a lot from simple integral parameters like sweetness and density, and that's what the keys are all about. But let me say one thing about changing demographics. As I said, we are rapidly becoming a majority-minority country, and minorities are the base of the Democratic Party. That means Republicans are battling against the demographic trends in this country. They can't create more old white guys, but that's why they're so desperately trying to limit the votes, particularly the votes of minorities, through all of these lawsuits and, you know, new rules and regulations making it harder to vote. It's, you know, a rational, if reprehensible, political strategy.
Alan Lichtman there, the so-called Nostradamus of predicting elections. Now in other news, in a rather interesting turn of events, Kamala Harris has overtaken Donald Trump in Iowa. Iowa, a state seen as a victory that was certain for Trump, but maybe not anymore. A poll from a highly respected pollster shows that Harris leading Trump 47% to 44%. Lots of helicopters here. You can hear we're outdoors here, so lots of air traffic. But going back to that story, 47% to 44% among likely voters in Iowa. In Iowa there, a sudden surprise there for Harris, putting her in the lead. We're now going live to Times Square, where our New York bureau chief, Natasha Israni, is standing by. Natasha, tell us more about this Iowa poll. What do we know?
Good morning, Ali. Yes, this news over the weekend has really overshadowed a lot else. Now, so much focus has been on the 7 swing states. To now see Iowa, which has reliably gone to Trump in the last 2 election cycles is a bit of a big change around, rather. And as you said, the pollster giving this information is highly respected. And according to her, one of the reasons could be women. And the fact that Roe versus Wade was overturned and more women are showing out in large numbers because this is a huge issue for many of them, the right to their own bodies and the right to have an abortion. So that could be one of the reasons. But I do also still want to point out that when it comes to the rest of the states, the swing states, the election, the polls show a very tight race. So by no means is this any clear indicator of what's going to happen come election day. But it certainly has been a big surprise, given that Trump and Harris were not really even campaigning that much in Iowa. And to talk to us about a lot more of the situation here in the United States and also the uncertainty that is at unprecedented levels compared to previous election cycles, we have 2 guests joining us in Times Square. We have Jamie Metzel. He's a geopolitical analyst, also a technology futurist, and the author of Super Convergence amidst other books. And we have Anu Gupta. He's a human rights lawyer. He's worked a lot on breaking bias, and that's also the name of his book, Breaking Bias. I wanted to start by asking both of you, as a reporter, I have to say this is the 5th US presidential elections I'm covering, but I've never felt a sense of fear, even the threats to the media that we see. And I want to just get a sense from both of you on where do you think this level of fear amongst voters, and also the polls are showing a large number of percentage of Americans are scared about what happens after election day. Why is that, Dave?
Well, we're seeing a level of toxicity in our electoral process that we haven't seen maybe since the Civil War or the end of Reconstruction. And the reason for that is an increasing tribalism in our political system. And we have one candidate, Donald Trump, who has his followers attacked the capital of our country. He's calling the media the enemy of the people. He's whipping his followers into a frenzy in a really dangerous way. And we need to have the messaging that we are all one country and one people. We're all in the same boat. And if we attack each other, our boat is going to sink. So I think certainly Anu and I are feeling heart palpitations about where things are heading.
Anu, what do you think?
Bias is really central to what's happening, and it's particularly up from so basically, they want to believe they weren't. But the media has done and amplified that, and people are, as a result, being manipulated.
Now, we are hearing campaign officials, in the election officials in the swing states, they're putting barbed wire around some, they're really preparing for possible political violence as well. And one thing they do point out is that they can create the right environment, they can learn de-escalation techniques as well. But what they are concerned about is what the Trump campaign might or might not say on election day. How big is that a factor? And the threats to Trump actually have come also from what he says is the Democratic side, and he's also survived an assassination attempt. So is this both ways?
I think it's both ways. It's being fed with, lies laced with anger and hatred and faster than truth itself. That's what's been happening. That's what's to manipulate public lawsuits of peace.
So we have a fantastic electoral. Last elections were really clean and fair, and the new ones will be too. But people are being pushed into these information cul-de-sacs.
Yeah.
And democracy is not an end in itself. It's a means to an end of good governance. And our democracy is only as good as we are. And so we need to inspire ourselves to be our best. And certainly we have people who are trying to push people to be our worst with fake claims that by their own private assertions, they don't even believe. And that's really dangerous. Democracy belongs to the people, but the American people need to fight for our democracy or we're going to lose it. And that is largely what this election is about.
Talking about democracy, America is well known as being the oldest democracy in the world, and it is still, a global leader on geopolitics. Now, when outsiders look at America and see this uncertainty, then questions are raised about American democracy. Do you think that's over-exaggerated, or do you think, come what may, no matter who, what wins, democracy is still going to survive and be robust in this country?
I think democracy will survive, but there's a reason the world has looked as it has since 1945, and that's because America and its allies won the war, and Germany and Japan and their allies lost the war. And so we live in a world where globalization is in many significant ways guided by what we in America are here doing at home. If we lose faith in ourselves, in our values, in our way of life, in the system that we've helped spread around the world that's benefited everybody, including everybody in India, that's going to be a real danger. And if Donald Trump comes in and strikes a deal and surrenders to Putin like he surrendered to the Taliban, if the message is that America is divided and weak, we're going to see a lot of conflicts around the world.
So analysts will say that sometimes what Trump says on the campaign is very different from what he does when he's in the White House. What do you say to that, Anu?
I think we have to believe him. We have like you said, we have to bring people together. We have to understand one another beyond our differences, because we all belong in this country, and that's what's real at stake. Who is American? Who isn't? Who belongs? Doesn't belong? And that's what I think a lot of voters are also questioning. Several things that voters will basically come on us out because we're talking about democracy. But if they don't, we still have to protect it together.
Yes, we've had huge early voting numbers, around 85 million is what I hear, but it's still less than 2020 in terms of early voting numbers. And that could have also been because of the pandemic, when there were a lot more mail-in ballots. And with that, I'm going to throw it back to you, Allister, in the studio. This is Natasha starting with her guest in Times Square.
Right. Thanks, Natasha. Natasha there, she was saying at Times Square. I'm here live in Washington, D.C. Moving on to other news now. Everyone would like to know when we'd get some indication of how the United States has voted tomorrow, Tuesday. Now, as you know, the U.S. has several time zones, so polls close and open at different times across the country. So here's a look at how some of those swing states will likely bring in those results across the day here in the U.S. Tuesday.
In most states, polling stations will throw open their doors to voters between 7 a.m. and 9 a.m. Eastern Standard Time, or EST, or 5:30 p.m. and 7:30 p.m. Indian Standard Time, or IST, Tuesday evening. Speaking of when polling will conclude, most stations will shut doors between 7 p.m. and 11 p.m. EST, or 5:30 a.m. and 9:30 a.m. IST, Wednesday morning. Now on to the pivotal swing states. In Pennsylvania, polls will open at 7 a.m. ET or 5:30 p.m. IST Tuesday evening and close at 8 p.m. ET or 6:30 a.m. IST Wednesday morning. The state commands 19 electoral votes. North Carolina, with 16 electoral votes, will begin voting at 6:30 a.m. ET or 5 p.m. IST Tuesday evening and close at 7:30 p.m. ET or 6 a.m. IST Wednesday morning. In Georgia, polls will open at 7 a.m. ET or 5:30 p.m. IST Tuesday evening and close at 7 p.m. ET or 5:30 a.m. IST Wednesday morning. Georgia has 16 electoral votes. Michigan polls will open around 7 a.m. ET or 5:30 p.m. IST Tuesday evening and close around 8 p.m. ET or 6:30 a.m. IST Wednesday morning. The state has 15 electoral votes. Arizona, with 11 electoral votes, will see polling open at 8 a.m. ET or 6:30 p.m. IST Tuesday evening and close at 9 p.m. ET or 7:30 a.m. IST Wednesday morning. Much like Arizona, in Wisconsin, voting will open at 8 a.m. ET or 6:30 p.m. IST Tuesday evening and close at 9 p.m. ET or 7:30 a.m. IST Wednesday morning. The state holds 10 electoral votes. And finally, Silver State, Nevada, with 6 crucial electoral votes, will begin voting at 10 a.m. ET or 8:30 p.m. IST Tuesday evening and close at 10 p.m. ET or 8:30 a.m. IST Wednesday morning. Kamala Harris and Donald Trump will need a minimum of 270 out of the 538 electoral votes to win the election, and the fate is likely to be sealed by these 7 crucial swing states, which account for 93 electoral seats. Arjun Samar Mahindran for NDTV World.
Lots of time zones to process there, from the East Coast to the West Coast, and you're probably wondering, when would we actually know? Is it Harris or Trump that's likely won? Well, unless it's a landslide, we probably might not know for several days, is what several analysts are telling us. So we'll be at the edge of our seats, perhaps for a little while longer. Moving on now to all the news. So just a few hours to go, less than a day before those polls open on Election Day here in the United States. I spoke with a former chairman of the Washington, D.C. Democratic Party here just a few moments ago to ask him about the sense on the ground of what things would be like as we head to the polls opening in a few hours from now. Scott, give us a sense of what's happening behind the scenes right now in the campaign offices, both for Kamala Harris and Donald Trump, just hours before people head to the polls on Election Day. What's it like right now, do you think?
Well, sheer excitement, one. There's a football term called running through the block, right? Well, both campaigns want to run through Election Day. They don't want to stop campaigning until November 6th, actually. Lots of excitement, a lot of concern, right? A lot of indigestion about what the outcome is. And, you know, after 2 years of campaigning, maybe a year, 9 months for Kamala Harris, it's nerve-wracking. It really is, because this race is so close according to the polling. I have a sense that one side or the other is going to win by 5 to 7 points. It's close, but you know, you have that 5-10% of independents or individual voters who haven't decided yet. And my gut is they're going to fall towards the positive, not the negative. They're going to fall towards Kamala Harris and not the Trump campaign. But we'll just have to see. But a lot of excitement, a lot of nervousness. And you know, when I say run through the campaign, that means you run until the election is over, if you will. That means you're doing door-to-door. You got your GoTV. GoTV is your number one priority right now. Are you going to leave it on the field, if you will? Because leaving it on the field means you're counting your votes. You're getting everyone to the polls through November 5th. Tomorrow is really the big day. You cannot miss one vote. I don't care who it is. And so that's a good flavor on what's going on with both campaigns now.
For our Indian audiences, GoTV, get out the vote.
Get out the vote, absolutely. It doesn't matter, nothing matters what your policies are, doesn't matter how much money you've raised, nothing else matters on November 5th. In fact, everything you're doing up to November 5th is preparing for get out the vote. You leave a lot of money in the bank to spend on GoTV, get out the vote, because that's your bread and butter. Your vote is your power. Your vote is how it gets you to 270 electoral votes, and it all comes down to that. And in a close race, it matters who's got the better ground game, who's got the most money for the ground game, who has the ground game in the organization, the volunteers, how you manage them. But in the end, getting as many votes to the polls is the bottom line. And remember, in America, even though we've got the Electoral College, all you got to do in most cases is get one more vote than the next guy. It's that simple.
Right. Scott, you've been there. You've been a former chair of the Democratic Party, the Washington chapter.
I've run for office locally. Yeah.
You've run for office locally. What happens at the local level at this point in time? Do you any sort of anecdotes that you can share from the time you remember way back a few years ago?
I remember 2016 on election night doing media, and Donald Trump was winning the race. that he was winning. He was getting electoral votes from different states that he was not supposed to win. Hillary Clinton was fading. And we knew by about 10 or 11, she wasn't going to get to 270. I was at a restaurant. There was a television station there that had various guests on. And from 7 o'clock to maybe 11, you had a lot of excitement. And then when it became clear that the blue wall was going to come down and that Donald Trump was going to be the next president, none of us thought that whatsoever. And you could just see the energy come out of that room. I mean, it just faded. It fell. And we were all trying to figure out what happened, what went wrong, what went right. But in the end, on November 6th, or whether the next day of the election, Donald Trump was going to be president, and he was going to be the most unique president we'd ever had.
I know you're going to say no, but are you going to be bracing for that potentially, maybe a little, this time around?
You know, the race, I should be. The race is so close according to the polling. But I still believe in America. I believe in the goodness of America. I believe in freedom, justice, and equality. And I believe that most voters are in the middle. They're not far right or far left. You just hear about the far right and far left more than the middle. The middle is boring. And those middle voters, suburban women, and all women, given the history and given the abortion issue, whether you're a Republican or a Democrat, as a woman, you care deeply about that choice and having control, reproductive freedom, and having control over your body. I think that's going to be the big issue. You can talk about immigration and economy. Those are super important. But I got to believe there are more women voters than men voters. And to women, reproductive rights is the number one priority, whether you're a conservative or a Democrat. That's what I believe.
Scott Baldwin, thank you very much for your time joining us here on NDTV. And that's it for US Decides for now, but we'll be on it. We have reporters across the US. NDTV World will have complete and accurate coverage of what's happening as those polls open and close tomorrow. Gauri Dwivedi, Natasha Israni, and me, Allister D'Souza, along with other reporters, have you covered. Thanks for your company. Thanks for watching. Stay tuned to NDTV World.